Marvel Avengers. Is it worth playing in 2021? Marvel Avengers is a game that died for so many reasons, but one of the main ones being the hype around it. During the first part of this video we'll be talking about the game at launch, and then during the second part we'll be looking at all the new content that's been added by Square Enix and finally answering the question of if it is worth picking up in 2021. Just before the launch of this game, it was plastered all over social media. Everyone was talking about it and it was really looking like it was going to be a mainstream success. But like other games, such as Cyberpunk 2077, it was launched in a failed state. It was lacking in content and really falling behind on what had the potential to be such an amazing game. It's been a year now. This game launched as a live service game, so the real question is, has it got any better? Have they managed to update the game to a state where it's actually playable and is fun? Out of everything this game failed to give at launch, the one big success that it had was its marketing. This managed to convince me to buy it on launch on the original Xbox One. But then again, this may have been half the reason why I really didn't enjoy it as much as I feel like I should have done. The game looked okay and it played absolutely fine, but the wait times really got to me and it seemed to take years to load each mission, which obviously we don't want happening. There were a load of bugs when the game launched, but I only ever had 2 crashes during the campaign, so I can't really say that it took away much from the experience, considering it was clearly developed for a console much better than the day one Xbox One. The original story for the game is great. I saw a lot of bad reviews on it and I really can't get my head around why, because to me it was a really good story. There were parts where it seemed to drag, the actual content of the story was insane. The use of Miss Marvel for the story of the Inhumans was great, as this is something that hasn't really been covered in any other form of mainstream media. One of the most important aspects of the game, which was the gameplay, was absolutely fine on launch. There were a few issues with it, but for me it was mainly just dropped frames, and to be honest the game didn't look as great as I was really hoping it would. But then again, I'm also going to put that down to the fact that I was playing it on some ancient technology. I'm sure if I was playing it on a next-gen console, it would have looked better, but because of a lot of these aspects, I never really felt compelled to go back to it at all. After completing the story, I turned it off and I didn't really touch it again. See, so here's the thing. The game released over a year ago, and I wanted to try it to see what they've improved. They've recently added the Black Panther DLC, and I was really excited for it. So, since I last played, they've added the 3 new characters, all of which have their own campaigns. One of them is Kate Bishop, one of them is Clint Barton, and one of them is the Black Panther DLC in Wakanda. So I wanted to give this game a fair chance. Myself and a fellow content creator, Jontis, feel free to go check him out in the card above, decided that we were going to go and play this game after buying it again on PC. This way we could play it together, get to experience exactly what they've added together, and also see how the game was supposed to be played. You know, with more than 20 frames a second. So far, the major changes that I've seemed to notice is how the game just feels an awful lot smoother. But then again, this could also be due to the fact that I'm now playing it on a PC and no longer on the outdated hardware such as the day one Xbox One. So I've managed to put in around 20 hours of it so far, and I can honestly say that I'm having a really good time. The story of the new characters is extremely fun to play, and the way their stories come into the world, it just seems to make a lot more sense, and it seems to follow each other really well, which is something that I've noticed in a lot of previous Marvel games they've really struggled with. At the moment, I've been playing an awful lot as Kate Bishop. Her moves really seem to suit my playstyle, and I'm really enjoying the Archer aesthetic way more than I probably should be. I do think that these updates, however, are coming very few and far between, which can be seen as both a positive and a negative. So the main reason that I see this as a positive is because you can always come back and they'll always have something to do, and it's a way to get you to pick the game back up and try again. But with it being so long in between each section, there's a lot of time where this game seems very dormant. It's a negative because, all in all, the game just seems really grindy. There's a large portion of the game that just makes me think of The Division. It seems to be just repeating the same things over and over again to try and get loot. Then you can use the resources and stuff to upgrade your gear, and you can jump back in just to be better than everyone else. Now, don't get me wrong, I completely understand the appeal of this game style, but doing it while using a Marvel skin is insane, because it's something that everyone loves. Marvel has become a huge superpower in the world of cinema, and recently they are taking the game industry by storm. It's not really the kind of game that I'm usually into, however I am really enjoying this, as contradictory as that statement may be. Even if the genre isn't for you, maybe it is still worth giving it a go, just to see if you do enjoy it. One of the main things that I am finding very irritating with the game is the gear system. The gear that always drops seems to be terrible, and then the resources that you gain, there's just so many different types that it becomes very, very difficult for you to try and upgrade the gear to be in a better position. This apparently has been made a lot better with the use of all of these new raids and stuff that they're planning to add in, and then obviously they're going to be trying to add more exotics in through doing weekly events and all of this stuff, which should make it a little bit better, but I just feel like the drop rates need to be a bit higher to reward people for playing, when at the moment the player base is very low. Now let's talk about the DLCs that they've added. So, the Kate Bishop DLC was incredible, and then they added Clint Barton. I understand that it was a carry-on, and it all made sense in the big plot of things with the story, but it just doesn't make sense to me that they would release 2 Hawkeyes back to back. Like, we just had one, why would you give us a second one when there is a ridiculous amount of characters within the Marvel Universe that people would care about, and people want to play as? I mean, you've used Kate Bishop, who is already a small name within the Marvel Universe. You've also made the main protagonist of the main campaign, Miss Marvel, who again is a small name within the Marvel Universe, and then you decide to add in the normal Hawkeye, which is Clint Barton, and it just doesn't really make sense, because you could have just gone with any other character within the Marvel Universe that is smaller and given them more of the limelight. So for me, that's one of the things that really bugs me. But I do think that the Black Panther DLC looks incredible. It plays incredible, and it was the perfect DLC to add in. With the Black Panther DLC being so different to the rest, and the aesthetic of it just being absolutely incredible, it was really nice to see that they are really still trying with this game. It reminds me very much of a No Man's Sky situation. The game released and it was broken, and they've done nothing to try and fix it ever since. And I hope that this game is going to carry on with the same trajectory as No Man's Sky. Now, one of my major issues is the next chapter that they're planning on releasing. They're planning to release a Spider-Man chapter, which is only available on PlayStation. And this is ridiculous, because Spider-Man is such a well sought after character, and he's going to be one that everybody wants to play as. Now, I understand that Sony own the rights, and they want to keep him far away from everyone else, because that's how they're selling consoles after all. But there's a huge downside to this, because while Square Enix are making and releasing this chapter for PlayStation, it's going to leave a mass drought for the rest of the fandom, and there's going to be a massive lack of content for this game on everywhere else. This is a problem. This shouldn't happen. Unless Square Enix are planning to make a campaign for each separate console that will be exclusive, I don't really understand why they should have done this. Why PlayStation get a Spider-Man campaign and everyone else is just left in the dark for a few more months. Because there's no way they can develop multiple campaigns at the same time after it's taken them so long to do each of these. But I would also like to point out that the game does seem a lot more stable since launch. With the release of all these updates and all these DLCs, they've fixed a lot of the problems that they were having originally. These mainly included the frame issues and the game crashes, but there are still a few things about the game that I am relatively unhappy about. The main one is going to be microtransactions. So I understand when games like Fortnite use microtransactions as much as they do, because the game is free to play, so it's a good way for the company to make money while they are spending money to run it. But when the currency in Avengers is the same price as games like Fortnite and Apex, and all you're getting is the cosmetic items, it's a little bit irritating. I do understand it from the point of view that you don't want to make the game pay to win, because that would look bad for the rest of us, but when you're paying £50 for a game and then end up getting basic suits, and they tell you you have to pay even more money to get the stuff that actually looks cool, it just really rubs me the wrong way from a consumer's point of view. Now, I think all the stories that they've added have been great. They seem to add much more intense dynamics into the game. The biggest one of note to me was the dynamic between Kate Bishop and Tony Stark. I think this is a very positive thing for them to try and add in, just for the fact that in the first story, in the main campaign, it felt a little bit empty with emotion. There was no real build-up of anything going on, and obviously at this point, most people know who these heroes are because of the MCU. But when they added Kate, a much lesser known hero, unless you're a big fan of the comic books, you needed to know more of her story. So they've added a lot more depth into the story so you can get to know her a bit better, which I think is great. But I think despite all of that, they really should have tried to do the same in the initial campaign to try and flesh out some more emotion towards the other Avengers. Despite the fact that most people nowadays will know who they are and know their stories, it's still nice to have sort of that background behind them when you're playing the game, because it gets you a bit more riled up and a bit more into it. Now, the main question that we wanted to answer in this video was, is the game worth buying in 2021? I think the answer is yes, but not at full price. This game can really make a comeback by becoming free to play. They would most likely end up making more money out of the microtransactions, and they would be able to expand their player base an awful lot. But I think the main issue for them right now would be stop focusing all their funding on the marketing. The game was plastered everywhere and the hype helped it die. Just fix the issues, expand on the content inside of the game, and make the current player base happy. When you have word of mouth, That's so much better than any of the marketing that you've got right now. This game has the ability to be one of the greats. I really hope that Square Enix can get this fixed before they shut the servers down. We saw that you were capable of doing an entire remake of Final Fantasy XIV, and that is now one of the biggest MMOs on the planet. So we know that you're capable of fixing this. So I just really hope that it happens. I hope you've all been good. I've been CJ, and I'll catch you in the next one.